NBC once looked at Michael J. Fox and basically said, I don't know if America wants to buy that face on a lunchbox. Which is hilarious, because a few years later, that same face was everywhere. TV, movies, posters, probably etched into the side of a Trapper Keeper. That's the thing about Family Ties. It's a show built on the idea of surprises. It pretends to be a simple sitcom about ex-hippie parents raising 3 kids in the suburbs. And then it quietly becomes a cultural lightning rod with jokes. One minute you're watching a family squabble over dinner. The next you're realizing the whole series is basically the 80s political mood swing trapped inside a living room, wearing a cardigan. And behind the scenes, even weirder. The show's focus shifted dramatically once audiences locked onto Alex P. Keaton. The theme song had its own identity crisis. A single romantic moment helped turn an older song into a chart-topping hit. There was even a spin-off attempt that sounds like it was invented during a late-night pitch meeting with too much coffee. So let's count down the strangest facts about Family Ties, from deep-cut trivia to the moments that changed the show forever. 15. It was pitched as hip parents, square kids. Here's the sneaky truth. Family Ties didn't start out as the Alex P. Keaton Show. The original pitch leaned hard on Stephen and Elise, 2 former idealists who've traded protests for PTA meetings, trying to raise kids in a world that suddenly feels more corporate, more conservative, and more complicated than the one they came from. In other words, the parents were supposed to be the main engine. Their values, their marriage, their how did we end up in the suburbs identity crisis. Alex was absolutely important, but he wasn't initially meant to become the gravitational center of the whole series. Then the show premieres, audiences respond, and the chemistry becomes obvious. When Alex walks into a scene, it changes the temperature. Suddenly, the writers realize they've got a character who can turn any topic, money, politics, dating, grief, into a punchline and a conversation. And that's the first weird fact. The show we remember isn't exactly the show that was planned. Family Ties basically evolved in front of everyone, like a sitcom that learned what it was while it was already on television. 14. NBC didn't want Michael J. Fox because of his lunchbox face. Casting stories always sound like myths until you realize they're painfully real, and this one is legendary. The network had doubts about Michael J. Fox because they weren't sure he had the kind of leading man look that sells merch, posters, and, yes, lunchboxes. Which is funny for 2 reasons. 1. Sitcoms are not the place you go for your Captain America jawline. And 2. Fox's whole charm is that he looks like a real person who somehow woke up with turbo-powered charisma. The bigger irony? Alex P. Keaton isn't supposed to be a traditional heartthrob anyway. He's a teenage bundle of ambition, smug confidence, and chaotic energy in a blazer. If he looked too perfect, the character would feel like a cartoon. Fox gave Alex something better. Speed, wit, vulnerability, and this I'm winning the argument even when I'm losing the room quality. So while the network hesitated, the show quietly did the thing networks pretend they want. It found someone unique and let them be the secret sauce. And once Fox got the role, the show didn't just succeed. It locked in an entire era of TV comedy. Which leads to the next weird fact. Because his schedule soon became completely unhinged. 13. He filmed Family Ties by day and Back to the Future by night. Imagine being on a hit sitcom, and then getting cast in the kind of movie that changes pop culture forever. Now imagine doing both at the same time, like your life is a juggling act, and sleep is a rumor. During the height of Family Ties, Michael J. Fox was also working on Back to the Future, and the schedules overlapped in a way that sounds medically irresponsible. The sitcom ran on a daytime production rhythm. The film often demanded nights. That means Fox would finish one set, commute to the other, shoot until the early morning, and then stumble back to do it again. If you've ever wondered why Alex sometimes has that I'm running purely on caffeine and spite energy? Well, there you go. What's wild is that it didn't just not break him, it arguably sharpened what people loved about him. Fox's on-screen rhythm is quick, alert, and precise, like his jokes have a built-in motor. That kind of timing doesn't come from laziness. And it also reframes the show in hindsight. While Family Ties was becoming iconic, its biggest star was literally sprinting between two cultural juggernauts. The 80s weren't just busy. They were aggressively busy. 12. The theme song wasn't always the version you remember. Okay, time to mess with your nostalgia in the gentlest way possible. The Family Ties theme song went through changes before it became the forever version in your brain. Most people hear that warm, upbeat, without us vibe and instantly picture the photo montage. The Keatons growing up, the family snapshots, the cozy glow of a sitcom that wants you to feel safe. But early on, there were variations in how the theme was presented. Different recordings, slight shifts, and even those subtle credit differences that make TV historians point at the screen like, "See, I told you." This stuff happens more than people realize. Shows tweak intros because they're still discovering their identity. The tone might be too soft, too peppy, too family-friendly, not sharp enough, whatever the network notes of the week happen to be. And Family Ties especially needed the right opening because the show is a balancing act. It's sweet and sincere, but also quick and sarcastic. It's about family warmth, but it's also about ideological friction. So the theme's evolution is like a tiny behind-the-scenes confession. They were adjusting the wrapper while the candy inside was becoming something bigger than expected. And speaking of music, one song connected to this show basically got resurrected into a full-blown hit. 11. A TV moment helped turn At This Moment into a chart-topping hit. Here's a weirdly powerful pop culture trick. Sometimes a TV show borrows a song, and the song borrows the TV show right back. Family Ties helped At This Moment explode with a whole new audience after it was used in an emotional storyline tied to Alex's relationship. It wasn't just background music. It was one of those sitcom suddenly feels like a drama, moments where a character stops being a punchline and starts being a person. And then, because the 80s were basically a giant feedback loop between TV, radio, and culture, the song took off. People heard it, felt it, asked about it, requested it, bought it. Like the show had quietly handed the track a second life. What makes this extra funny is that Family Ties is known for jokes and ideological debates, but one of its most lasting side effects is musical. It's like the Keatons accidentally launched a power ballad while arguing over capitalism. And it also shows how massive network TV used to be. Today, a song can trend on a clip for 48 hours and disappear. Back then, a primetime moment could basically pick up a track, dust it off, and shove it straight into the mainstream. Which brings us to the next fact, because one of the show's most famous romances didn't just work on screen, it kept going when the cameras stopped. 10. Michael J. Fox met Tracy Pollan on the show, and it became real life. Sitcom romances are usually disposable. They show up, stir the plot, and vanish with a wave and a laugh track. But Family Ties pulled off something rarer, a storyline that turned into a real-life, how is this so wholesome moment. Tracy Pollan joined the series as Ellen, Alex's love interest, and their chemistry didn't feel like a typical sitcom pairing. It had that slightly calmer, more grounded energy that made Alex seem less like a hyperactive debate robot and more like an actual teenager with feelings. And the fun, weird fact is that this wasn't just casting magic. Fox and Pollan met through the show, and their connection carried beyond it. Later, they ended up together for real, one of the most famous examples of TV couple becomes actual couple in 80s pop culture. It's also kind of perfect for Family Ties. The whole show is about contrasts that somehow fit. Hippie parents and capitalist son, sincerity and sarcasm, family warmth and ideological chaos. Fox and Pollen had that same balance. Sweet, steady, and not trying too hard to be sitcom cute. So while Alex is out here acting like a tiny adult businessman, the show quietly creates one of its most lasting real-world legacies, a love story that didn't end with a final episode. Now let's hit a piece of trivia that sounds made up until you check it and realize it's real. 9. The TV parents share the same birthday. This is one of those the simulation is lazy facts. Meredith Baxter, Elise, and Michael Gross, Steven, were born on the same exact day. Same birthday, same year. So yes, Family Ties gave us a TV couple who are literally the same age, down to the date. If that feels oddly appropriate, it's because their characters also have this perfectly synced team vibe. Steven and Elise argue with each other, tease each other, disagree on parenting, but there's always this sense that they're on the same side of the rope. Knowing they share a birthday makes it feel even more like the universe accidentally optimized their casting. And it adds to why the Keaton parents work so well. They don't feel like sitcom mom and sitcom dad. They feel like two people who actually built a life together and are now trying to run a household where their kids are pulling them in 3 different directions. Also, can we appreciate how rare it is for a sitcom couple to feel like a real marriage without being constantly miserable? Steven and Elise have disagreements, sure, but there's warmth underneath. The show doesn't need to turn them into enemies to make scenes funny. So yes, it's a fun trivia nugget, but it's also a neat little symbol. The Keatons were built to match. And now, let's talk about the sibling who doesn't always get the icon credit, but absolutely shaped the show's personality. 8. Mallory wasn't just the ditzy one. The show quietly upgraded her. Early Family Ties sometimes treats Mallory like the classic sitcom setup. She says something airheaded, Alex makes a snarky comment, the scene moves on. But over time, Mallory becomes way more interesting than the popular girl stereotype. Justine Bateman plays her with this combination of confidence and vulnerability that sneaks up on you. Mallory can be shallow in one scene, then unexpectedly perceptive in the next. She's not dumb. She's young, social, image conscious, and figuring out what matters beyond the surface. And as the series goes on, you can feel the writers realizing they've got more to work with. Mallory becomes a real counterweight to Alex, not just in values, but in emotional intelligence. Alex wins debates. Mallory often wins the room. It's also one of the reasons the show stays watchable. If every episode was just Alex steamrolling people with logic, it would get exhausting. Mallory brings warmth, unpredictability, and that special sitcom ingredient. The ability to make a scene funny without making it cruel. So the weird fact isn't Mallory is secretly brilliant, like it's a plot twist. It's that the show gradually stopped using her as a punchline and started treating her like a person. And that shift is a huge reason the family dynamic feels real. And speaking of characters who unexpectedly took on a bigger life, let's talk about Nick, the leather jacket boyfriend who somehow launched a whole alternate TV universe that never happened. There was a Nick spin-off attempt with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and it still didn't happen. Nick is one of those characters who feels like he walked in from a completely different show. The street-smart guy with the leather jacket, the raspy voice, the I've seen things vibe. Except the things are mostly mall parking lots and blue-collar life lessons. He became popular enough that the idea of a spin-off started floating around. And here's where it gets extra weird. The attempted spin-off concept involved Nick as the lead, and it also connected to a young Julia Louis-Dreyfus, long before she became sitcom royalty. That's right, a Family Ties spin-off attempt with a future legend in the mix that never turned into a full series. And honestly, that's very on-brand for network TV. Executives are always trying to bottle lightning twice. A supporting character pops, and the network goes, great, give him his own show. Like it's a simple copy-paste operation. But spin-offs are fragile. You can take the funniest side character in the world and still fail if the new environment doesn't spark the same chemistry. Nick worked because he bounced off the Keatons, especially Mallory. Remove the family dynamic, and you're gambling. So this is one of those alternate history sitcom moments. Somewhere out there is a version of the 80s where Nick got his own series. And maybe everything that came after comedy-wise shifts slightly. But the show didn't need a spin-off to prove it could hit hard. Because at its peak, Family Ties delivered an episode that still gets talked about, like it's in a different category entirely. 6. A. My Name is Alex wasn't a typical sitcom episode. It was an emotional gut punch. If you only know Family Ties as Alex says something smug, the parents react, laugh track, fade out, then A. My Name is Alex feels like someone changed channels without warning. This two-part episode dives into grief and shock in a way sitcoms didn't always dare to do, especially not with this kind of seriousness. Alex isn't just sad. He's disoriented. He's angry. He's trying to intellectualize pain the same way he intellectualizes everything else, and it doesn't work. That's the point. What makes it powerful is that it doesn't abandon the character's personality. Alex is still Alex. He debates. He jokes. He pushes. But the episode reveals what's underneath the armor. A kid who's terrified that being smart and in control won't protect him from losing people. It's also a reminder of what Family Ties could do when it stopped being a sitcom about politics and became a family story with real emotional consequences. This is the kind of episode that turns a show from a comfort watch into something you remember. Like, years later, you might forget individual jokes. You don't forget this. And after that emotional weight, we're going to pivot to something that's pure 80s TV charm. The weirdest, cutest 3-second tradition ever. 5. Sit, Ubu. Sit is a real dog, a real in-joke, and a whole era of TV in one tag. If you grew up on 80s TV, you know the moment. The show ends. The credits roll, and then, like a tiny cherry on top, sit, Ubu, sit, followed by a bark.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
It's so simple, and somehow it's burned into memory. And here's the weird fact. That wasn't random. Ubu was a real dog, belonging to the show's producer, and the little tag became a signature for the production company. It's the kind of detail that makes older television feel oddly personal. Modern shows end with polished logos and dramatic stings. Back then, you could end a primetime program with a dog bark and a joke, and nobody blinked. It also says something about the era. TV was big business, sure, but it still had these small, human fingerprints everywhere. A producer putting his dog in the end tag feels like the entertainment version of writing your name in wet cement. And for Family Ties, it's perfect. The series is warm, slightly silly, and deeply nostalgic. So ending with a tiny, friendly ritual feels like the show winking at you on the way out. Now let's jump to the kind of weird fact that sends you straight to wait. That person was on Family Ties territory, because the guest star list is absolutely stacked. 4. The guest stars are basically a before they were huge festival. One of the best games to play with Family Ties is Spot the Future Superstar. Because the show's guest bench is ridiculous. You get people who would go on to dominate movies, TV, and pop culture, showing up for an episode like it's just another Tuesday. And the fun part is seeing them in that early career energy. Hungry, sharp, a little raw, still figuring out the exact version of themselves that the world will later recognize. This happens for a few reasons. 1. The show was popular, so it attracted talent. 2. Network TV used to be the pipeline. If you wanted exposure, you showed up on a hit sitcom and made a memorable impression. 3. Family Ties could handle guest stars because the core cast was strong enough to keep the story grounded. And it's not just, hey, look who it is, cameos. Often, the guest star actually matters to the plot. Romances, rivals, friends, troublemakers, people who push Alex or Mallory or the parents into a new corner. So rewatching the show today feels like flipping through a yearbook where half the background students grew up to be famous. And speaking of, wait, seriously? Let's talk about an episode that is peak 80s sitcom energy. Jennifer's Band storyline, featuring someone you absolutely know. 3. Jennifer's Band episode had Christina Applegate, and it's maximum 80s. Jennifer is sometimes the stealth MVP of Family Ties. She's younger, sharper than people expect, and she often delivers the kind of one-liners that feel like they were smuggled in from an older sibling's script. And then the show gives us a delightfully 80s scenario. Jennifer gets tangled up in music drama, because of course she does. And one of the memorable pieces of that storyline is Christina Applegate showing up as Keaton. Yes, Keaton. The nickname alone tells you exactly what decade you're in. What makes this weird fact fun is the contrast. Today, Applegate is iconic, but in these early appearances, you get a glimpse of that comedic spark before it becomes the fully formed sitcom legend version of her. It's also a reminder of how sitcoms used to experiment with youth culture. They'd toss in a band storyline, a style trend, a mini social plot, something that felt current, then snap right back to the living room for a Keaton debate. So the weird part isn't that Jennifer had a band episode. The weird part is how naturally the show could be both, a family sitcom about clashing values and a time capsule of teenage culture beats. Now let's talk about the hardware behind the legend, awards. Because Family Ties didn't just become popular, it became decorated. 2. Alex didn't just become the face of the show, he became an awards machine. When a sitcom character becomes an icon, you expect catchphrases, posters, Halloween costumes, maybe a few imitators. You don't always expect a full-on awards era. But Michael J. Fox's performance as Alex P. Keaton didn't just win fans. It won serious industry recognition. And you can see why. The character isn't one note. He's smug but insecure, funny but sometimes painfully earnest, confident until something breaks through his armor. That range is catnip for awards voters because it's not easy sitcom charming. It's precision comedy with emotional depth hiding inside it, and the show's success created a feedback loop. As Alex became the breakout, the material often leaned into bigger storylines for him. Romances with weight, family conflicts, moments where Alex is forced to confront that life isn't a debate club. That gave Fox the chance to do more than punchlines. It also elevated the whole series. Because when your funny kid character can carry dramatic moments, the show becomes less disposable. It becomes something people remember as quality, not just comfort. So yeah, Family Ties was a hit, but it was also a show that, almost by surprise, earned a place in that top-tier sitcom conversation. And for our number one weird fact, we're zooming out. Because the most interesting thing about this series isn't just casting or songs or guest stars. It's what the whole show accidentally became. 1. Family Ties is basically America's 80s vibe shift, trapped inside one family. Here's the biggest weird fact. Family Ties isn't just a sitcom. It's a cultural snapshot, so clean, you could put it in a museum. The entire premise is built on contrast. Parents shaped by 60s and 70s idealism, raising a son who's sprinting toward 80s ambition like it's a sport. Stephen and Elise represent a worldview that believes in community, empathy, and social responsibility. Alex represents the belief that success is earned, money is a scoreboard, and feelings are negotiable. And the show doesn't treat that like a one-time gimmick. It makes it the engine. Week after week, the living room becomes a mini courtroom where the decade's biggest arguments get turned into jokes, family tension, and sometimes surprisingly heartfelt endings. That's why it still works. Even if you don't care about the specific politics, the dynamic is timeless. Parents watching their kids become strangers. Kids thinking their parents are outdated. Everyone trying to love each other through it anyway. So yes, we can laugh at the blazers and the hair and the very special episode energy, But the show's secret superpower is bigger. It captured a real generational shift without losing the warmth that makes sitcoms rewatchable. So there you have it. Family Ties, the sitcom that started as hip parents, complicated kids, and turned into a full-on pop culture machine. You've got the casting doubt that aged hilariously poorly. You've got Michael J. Fox running on what I can only assume was pure adrenaline while bouncing between a hit TV show and a legendary movie. You've got a theme song that had to find its final form, and a dramatic music moment that basically revived a song into a mainstream phenomenon. You've got a real-life love story born from a sitcom romance. You've got the weirdly perfect trivia that the TV parents share the same birthday. You've got the Nick spinoff that almost was, the emotional heavyweight of My Name is Alex, and the ultimate comfort food cherry on top. Sit, Ubu. Sit! And honestly, that's why Family Ties sticks. It's funny, it's cozy, and it's sharper than people remember. It could be goofy one minute and sneak up with something real the next. Now, I want to hear from you. Which fact surprised you the most? And what's your go-to Family Ties episode? The one you can throw on and instantly feel like it's 1985 again.